Authority is what the housing need is. Why does everybody keep saying there's a housing crisis? Why is everybody saying there's a housing availability problem? And how would this BAFA, which would help create houses, how would that have helped? And right now, that's off the ballot, but on the ballot is this thing called Prop 5, which could make housing funds more possible. That'll be our conversation tonight. And then locally, if we had received these funds from the regional authority, which this BAFA would have been regional, what would that have meant to Petaluma? What could we have done with our housing shortage, our housing crisis right here in Petaluma with this state measure? So going forward, is this the slides tonight are going to be content heavy. I apologize. Part of it's because I'm an engineer and love data, and I'm going to put a lot of data up here. I brought a laser pointer to tell you exactly where I'm going here. But most of the data comes from this report that Cal's crew just put out. You want to talk a little about the report before we start?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So this is our 2024 State of Housing report, which we actually just released. God, was it last week? Feels like 3 weeks ago. We had our State of Housing event, our housing summit that we host annually. And so this little thing is chock full of a great number of charts. And I have a handful of them up here that I'm happy to share with people, but there's also digital copies online, and all our other reports are online. And I can be sure to share that information with you as well.
So the first thing we wanted to share was, well, what can people really afford? And you've heard ARENA numbers. This is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. And the state says, well, you must do a thing. All that is based on income levels. And it's the income levels can be a single person or multiple people in a household. And it's categorized by the average median income of the county. It's probably a thing to remember tonight. Every time we say averages, it's worse in South County than it is in, say, Santa Rosa. And if you're a person of color, it's worse again. So, you know, averages are a weird thing. Take them for a generalization that they are. So right here, we're seeing in the first column for a very low income housing, it's still 30% on housing, which at 30%, above 30%, you are rent burden. That's a technical definition people throw about. And then at 50%, you're severely rent burdened. I mean, you have no money left for anything else. And so how do you get to a job when you have no money to get to the job? You know, it's a trap to be poor, and it's hard to get out of it. But the main ways we break out income here are in the very low, low, middle, and higher income. When this would be market rate, would be the kind of housing for you if you make more than 120% of the area median income here. And in the middle here, middle income, 80 to 120, that can still be government programs for affordable housing. So when we build subdivisions and the city says the developer must put in 15% affordable housing, some of that fits in this box, the middle income box. Some of it fits in the low. None of it is in the very low. When a Burbank, a PEP housing, a mid-pen housing, the nonprofits that come in, they focus their 100% project, 50 units in an apartment. They focus that on very low and never come up in the middle income part. But here's the kind of numbers, and I don't want to get too hung up on numbers because there's a lot. And so an income of 57 to 76 for a house of two, 1/3 is somewhere between 1,400 and 1,900. Now, anybody done an effort at finding rent lately? Anybody find anything under 2,000?
I haven't. It's terrible.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the problem here. As we look at these numbers, there aren't any houses here that don't put you into rent burdened. And this goes before you think about purchasing, which is a whole different trap, if you will. Let's see. So, Cal, why don't you tell us what we're going to see here?
All right. So like you said, there's a lot of charts. I'm sorry. Tried to keep the text somewhat limited. So on the left-hand side here, the first chart we're seeing is the total housing units produced by decade. You'll notice they built a lot in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. Hell, even into the 2000s, they were still building a decent amount. And then the recession happened and housing just stopped. And it really hasn't come back. A lot of people see a lot of projects being built and like, whoa, that's a lot of housing. But it's just because we haven't seen a lot of housing in so long, we've forgotten what it's like. And so we're like, this is an aggressive amount of building, but we used to build way more. And so that chart just helps kind of illustrate that, so that we're really not keeping up with the demand. And then you look over here, the other problem that we have, and this is a systemic issue across the entire country. I mean, we have it a lot in California, but it's not unique to us, is 90% of our housing stock in Sonoma County is single family detached homes. And most people my age can't afford those, not even close. Unless you're with a partner, then maybe you can squeak it out and make it work. And so we don't really have a lot of the kind of entry level homes that would normally be for someone like myself, young families, et cetera. And so that's the issue that we're running into. And unfortunately, it is weirdly expensive, and there's not a lot of grants and funding support for missing middle housing. I mean, they're putting out more and more, but up until now, there hasn't really been a lot of opportunities. And so now we're lagging behind. And so the goal is really to focus on building more of these duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, et cetera, because that's going to be the opportunity for people to get into entry level housing.
Right. That when the law got in front of condos and we stopped building condos, that really cut the difference between a house you could buy and everything else in the market. One anecdotal thing about this, the first bar chart here in production side of things, is that when Petaluma went to the Supreme Court and said, you know, we need to have a housing stop on how much can happen. And that was 500 units is what they decided. 500 units a year was enough housing in Petaluma. They drew the line, no more than 500. We haven't done more than 200 a year in over 10 years. I think the average is like 180. And of that, an awful lot of it is the affordable housing we're putting in. So in terms of market rate, let's say you are getting by barely, there's just no availability. So it's both ends of the same problem.
So yeah, so this one's a little bit harder to read, but kind of the gist of it is, so this is a really hard one to explain. So the total number of the region's highest price rental units, so those that were 2,000 or more, if you look over here, so that represented a far smaller share of the overall rental stock in terms of pricing. But then over time, up till now, it's completely like flipped. So now most of the units are way over the top expensive. And some of those more moderate units are completely gone. And that is a function, a result, a consequence of the limited housing stock. And that's just the reality of the situation we're living in right now. I mean, when you constrain supply, you know, you're going to see prices go up. Not everyone's a believer in supply and demand, but it is a thing, and it's been thoroughly studied. And so that's kind of what we're seeing here. And it's just kind of the system we're operating in. And then over here is just another kind of chart that kind of details some of the cost burden that we're seeing in the community. And really at the end of the day, I mean, there is, if you look right here, so this is severely cost burdened. So if you're extremely low, majority of the people are severely cost burdened, barely scraping by. Even when you get to low income, you still have a 20% of people in Sonoma County are still experiencing severe cost burden. And then even here, like moderately burdened, I mean, almost 50% of the people that are in the moderate income bracket in Sonoma County are experiencing cost burden, and that's probably because they got school loans.
You know, a lot. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So this is pulled from IPUMS or census data. Yeah. Oh yes. Yes, that is.
So how big is this data set? I'm just
huge.
Okay. You know, and the other thing to point out is, you know, we give a lot of lip service to equity, you know, to people who don't work as tech pros and don't make a lot of money you know, and all the other areas of equity we want to touch on. And what happens with those people? That, you know, people who don't make much money, but maybe live here, family here, job here. They're who serve our needs here, who are service workers here, are the ones who are spending everything in their life on this. And so that's an obligation, I think, to address in our housing policies at the city and county.
So here we're talking about households with children. That is, as you imagine, a preeminent issue. And we are seeing more and more families either leaving or just not coming to Sonoma County, which is obviously a big issue over time. And it's why we're seeing schools countywide start to close. And they'll continue to unfortunately close if we don't fix this issue. And you'll notice that Sonoma County is seeing pretty significant declines. They're the dark green line right there. And we're not the worst. Solano's doing pretty badly, or hurting pretty badly, that is. But we are up there. And we have seen a sizable decline in the percentage of families with children over the past just even decade. And honestly, if we don't obviously take significant measures to actually address this, we're going to see even steeper declines over the years to come.
We're doing a general plan update right now, and it's all about vision. What do you want to see the city look like? And it's important that we focus and remember to say, oh, we want a diverse community. We want a community that has children, has seniors, and go ahead and talk about that.
In case you haven't noticed, he's the positive one. I'm the Debbie Downer. Sorry. Someone's got to do it. So over here, we also have the change in total households by age of householder. And then, once again, I mean, if you look here, so over time, so you can't really, it's hard to tell, but unfortunately, because of the screen, it's really hard to tell the differences between the lines. But over time, we have seen a significant shift towards more older households, and those numbers are climbing. And at the same time, we're seeing, our key workforce households, as Kevin was noting, in the 35 to 54 age group, declined significantly from 2000 to 2020.
We're becoming an older community. The county's recently addressed this as a master plan for aging now, because it needs to be called out on its own. It's so important. But that will also call for funding. Funding comes from people having jobs in town. It's like one treacherous loop that we're on here.
Got to spend money to have the resources. So this is vacancy rates countywide. So once again, supply and demand, right? You're seeing there's a pretty low vacancy rate. And so obviously when there's a lower vacancy rate, there's less choice. It usually leads to substantial increases in the cost of rental units. And so again, you notice even 2010, is pretty sizable, because, obviously there was a lot of shift in the country after or during the recession or following the recession. But then, now we're down to a kind of almost a historic low. It's been a long time since we've been this low in terms of the vacancy rate. And so that's really what we're trying to address.
And I don't know who caught the NPR piece today, where they were talking about low vacancy rates. There's less tendency for landlords to reinvest in their properties. When the vacancy rate is low and rent is high, the money rolls in, and they do not have to compete for tenants. So there was studies showing how properties deteriorate during low vacancy rate opportunities. And
I can actually comment on that. My landlord doesn't do anything to my apartment, and it's a borderline dungeon. Yeah, he doesn't invest in his property because he doesn't need to. I mean, people will always be there because it's on the cheaper end, and people will always be in line to fill the unit. And so there's nothing driving him to spruce up the unit. Nothing.
So this one's really a kind of a fun one here. This has to do with who works and lives in your town, and who lives in your town and works somewhere else, that kind of thing. How much inflow, how much outflow. Now, if you live in Cloverdale, you probably don't want to drive far. You probably have a high in city like this, right? But if you live in Sonoma, nobody that works in town lives in town, right? So we're here in the middle of this trend. But look how many people go out of town, and look how many workers come into town. And why is that? Could that be housing policy? You know, I think it's important to try and address this. I've added this sort of as a climate connection to housing. Housing has a connection to everything. It has a connection to children's educations, to public health. I mean, just go down the list. Housing is connected to everything, including aging. And so it's directly connected to climate.
You know, one of the biggest fear Katati people always have is being a bedroom community, and that's exactly what they're talking about. This is what they're concerned about. People literally just live there. They're not working there. They just go home there, and that is a problem actually in terms of, you know, long-term fiscal sustainability. And then 70% of Sonoma Valley Hospital, the staff there, they don't live there. They commute from far away, Lake County, Mendocino County. I've talked with a lead person there. Some of them are coming as far as Fairfield and even farther than that. Some are coming from Sacramento, which is crazy. What do we have?
More on climate, more on climate. On this one, we talk about like where you live and how far you go. If you saw on the last slide that people drive a distance, not only do they drive a distance, but they drive alone. And so this is a tremendous indictment that living and working and not living and working in the same place is a climate issue.
It's almost like we need more trains.
So that gets us to, you know, what are the smart guys doing in the room? You know, in their big government, thinking about things all the time, good things. And maybe yes, maybe no. But they had a ballot measure put on for this November. And it was $20 billion. That's B with a billion in it behind it. And 9 Bay Area counties were involved in this. This is the all KBYG Bay Area counties. It was thought to be able to address 72,000 affordable homes. And it would have been a voter thing coming up in November. And obviously the most ambitious thing that would have been tried, Santa Rosa had tried a housing bond, and I think others have tried housing bonds for their communities, but they built in all the standard strict accountability and oversight for it.
And one of the cool things that I really loved about the BAFA bond that I always like sharing with people is it had a revolving loan fund. So 20% of what was raised through this bond would have been a revolving loan. So it would have gone out and then it would have come back with very low interest. And so we would have had, you know, a steady pipeline of finance, you know, continuously circulating through the system. And that might have actually been enough to hold us over for quite some time. So I always thought that was really cool, and it's a bummer we don't have it, but we'll figure it out.
So there is this lead agency here, the Finance Authority, who was structured for this and for other purposes. They have existing programs out there, so they were a reliable partner, a regional government partner, and they would have been leading on the bond proposal. And again, it was the first regional finance agency in the state. And they were specifically set up because everybody recognizes the housing problem. And they collaborate with local officials. Like I mentioned, Victoria Fleming, Dennis Pozike were on their advisory boards. County set up a staff to help work with them because this would have been a huge shot in the arm for our county. And they could do it through region-wide power. You know, if we're all in this, things go better than if somebody tries to take it alone.
And Casey's listening, I gotta give, we gotta give the supervisor a shout out too.
Oh, absolutely.
He's also on that board. So if he's listening, I remembered you.
And we do have to, and the supervisor is referring to as David Rabbit.
Yeah.
David Rabbit has been in the housing game for a very long time and helping out in a lot of ways. There was a thing called CASA some 10 years ago. That was an effort to do the same thing. It's not like this is a new problem, but now hopefully we have enough people on board that we can really make progress. Unfortunately, there are 2 problems with the ballot issue, and one of them was it just didn't poll at the 2/3 necessary. I mean, you know, a lot of times you could ask people, is it daytime or nighttime? It's hard to get 2/3 around here. You know, I mean, I remember when I led the parks bond issue, we got 62%, and all my friends congratulated me. And I said, you do know it's 66 to win. You know? And they didn't. But 66 is a very difficult thing. So it was removed from the ballot because it was not felt that now was the right time to get that. And then, but the need remains, and we still want to do these things. And of course, BAFA is still able to do this if we feel like we have the support for it. What it would have done regionally or Sonoma County wide was there's all these projects that are ready to go. You know, people have ideas. It's not like we don't have ideas. And, you know, we have a housing element that says this is the place for this and this is the way for this, and programs that the housing element says, if you put houses here, it will build a lot of houses. Then the second chapter says, and if you use this policy, it's better for people. If you use this policy, it helps people this way. So it's both a numbers game and a policy game that we already have at the city, which helps us push forward to achieve these goals. The arena there we talk about in the middle there is our countywide. If you include Santa Rosa, it's 8,600 units they want over an 8-year period. So that's a lot, and it's a little. You know, at the Gen H Housing Summit the other day, one of the speakers said, you do know that we would solve this a lot quicker if we were the people who were unhoused. You know, your motivation would change. So, and as we look around our county, there's 2,500 people who are homeless currently, and that's in fact up. Now, that's from a point in time count, so it's highly suspect until you put it against the suspect count the year before and the year before. That makes it look like real data, at least for trend lines. You know, did we do better this year or not? Maybe the number's not the right number. Maybe there's more, maybe there's less, but we know it went up in 23. And to be fair, it went down in Petaluma. It did. It went down 10% in Petaluma, but countywide we were up.
You know, Kevin, if you want to give me your home, we can put this to the test.
Yeah. So we had gotten this far in BAFA. We had figured out what we would do with the money if we got the money. So they knew that coming to Sonoma County, that there would be this $500 million coming to Sonoma County. They took a city out of every county. They said, well, Santa Rosa, you're special. We're going to give you your own special money. So in another chart up the top, it says excluding Santa Rosa. But Santa Rosa got another like 250 million just for themselves. And God bless them, the homeless problem in Santa Rosa. I hope they do get the money they need to help solve that problem. But there were various ways of slicing and dicing. And we think that we would have come out with like $94 million over about an 8 to 10 year period. You know, it doesn't happen all at once, but that's an impactful number for a town like Petaluma. And what the law would have been, what the proposition declared, is you got to spend the money in 3 different ways. And so you can build houses, that's the first column. And they said you must build at least 50% of the money has to go into building houses. More than 50% of the money has to go into building houses. And then they also said, and we want the housing to be affordable housing. So you have to match the curve of your RENA numbers. If you have a lot of very low, you got to spend that percentage of your half in very low. And then they said, and people that are in houses that are threatened for losing their houses, the house deteriorates, things like that. We want you to invest money in that. And that's where Drake and Rebuilding would come in here. And they want 15% to go to keeping people in their houses that are that need maintenance on the houses. And there's a lot of ways that that kind of money could be done. In the 70s and 80s, when affordable housing started, a lot of them had deeds that said for 25 years, this must be affordable. Well, when that comes to market, you know, it will go to market rate. 25 years from the 70s, and or even 50 years from the 70s now would be coming on the market. We could use this money and there was a note that said, if the city has the money to buy it or to buy it down, we get first rights at the house. So this money could be a way to keep properties in affordable housing that might otherwise slip out. And then they allowed for some flex funding at the end. And that's the policy type things I mentioned from the housing element. It could be first time home buyer down payments. It could be more money into mobile home rehabilitations. And the secret that's not everybody understands is that mobile homes are an affordable housing that's not deed restricted, could go away in a heartbeat. right? But it's affordable at this point, and we can't afford to lose it as part of the inventory in town.
And the offsite infrastructure improvements would have been really great as well, obviously. And it could have been used for anything, water, sewage, anything that relates directly to the affordable housing project. That's related to infrastructure would have actually been approved and would have been okay for expenditure. And so again, I mean, there's a lot of old sewage and water lines as you well know, and replacing those would have been mighty nice.
Right. And if we put those infill projects in an older neighborhood, we put the burden of new sewer on the affordable housing complex. Well, that's sometimes the burden that breaks the financial viability for an affordable housing project. So what is next?
All right, so the BAFA bond has been backburnered. And it might, so the one thing you guys should know is come 2026, I had to think about it. It might come back again. But there is a competing transportation bond that's being discussed as well. And so we're just obviously trying to get through November right now. Things are crazy, but after November, there will be a discussion about how they want to do that. They want to slice and dice and then couple it together or whatnot. So that's going to be negotiated and figured out. So it's not dead. We might still be able to move forward with that in the future, but really what's before you now and what's most important. And by the way, if you scan right there, it'll take you to their website and you can learn more. I just want to say that from the outset. It'll be on every slide in case you want to scan it. But the Prop 5 will lower the voting threshold from 66.7%, as you know, the mayor pointed out, to 55%. And it would be to fund affordable housing and public infrastructure. That's how it's been for, God, I think they did it like 100 years ago. This has been a policy that's been in place for a really, really long time. And at this point, it's becoming a big issue because, as Kevin also pointed out, Measure N 2018, this is just after, the 2017 wildfires in Santa Rosa. We put a bond out there because we wanted to raise funds so that we could help, get the rebuilding effort underway in a pretty grand and robust manner. It would have been a really great opportunity for emergency home building. 38% killed that measure, 38%. And I'm going to take a shot at the Howard Taxpayers Association. They would say, well, that's fair. That's fair. 38%. That's fair. Well, we don't think that's fair because 62% of the electorate had their vote overturned by a small minority. At the end of the day, the majority should be speaking, especially on, important matters such as this. And so I kept it kind of high level and pretty, so you didn't have to stare at words the whole time. So, so Proposition 5 can go to a great number of things. So sure, affordable housing, low, middle income families, get some of those starter homes built, etc. But it also, again, it gives you the power, the opportunity, the control to raise funds and help put it towards our aging infrastructure. I'm the first to, be at a meeting like, listen, I know we have aging infrastructure, but we also need to build housing and we also need to address the infrastructure. There's no clean way to really address this, unfortunately. It's kind of the bind that we're in. But what we can do is leverage, local dollars, because if we raise $1 million, we can leverage that in local match funds 5 times, actually probably 8 times more at the state level or the federal level. And there is a report that was generated by the county that I'm trying to find and share that references just that. But the long and short of it is, if we were to say get $1 billion, we could turn that easily into $10 billion through matching state and federal funds. So it would be a significant trough of funding that, again, can go towards a variety of different things. So it could be water infrastructure, it could be transit. You could put it towards something related to your airport. It's pretty broad in terms of like overall infrastructure and what you can use it on. There's a variety of environmental initiatives, climate related things that you can put it towards. You could put it towards wildfire prevention. It is a huge, long list of things. And so there's a lot of flexibility on what we can use these dollars for. And that's why it's so important, because this will allow us to quite frankly catch up. Because we are all across this county, across the state, really across the country, we are all behind on a great number of things. And so this is the opportunity to really kind of give us back on track. And then once again, obviously the programs for first-time home buyers, which I would love. So more of that would be really great, I think.
But I just love that point that you were making about the multiplier effect.
Yeah.
I mean, the state and the Fed funding sources really love when local brings committed money. And this would allow us to get local committed money. And so we could have a housing thing that said, if we put in 20%, if you can find 80%, the rest, we'll put in 20. And so we would bring more money in to multiply the benefit of doing this thing.
Yeah, it would be huge.
How does it work? Do you apply states for the money? Like,
So no, this right here, this is not money. This is not a money thing. This is
Yeah, I
a
should say
election
that.
thing.
Yes.
It would change the game, change the rules,
Yeah.
and say, if you want to pass a local housing bond, you need 55, not 66.
Yeah,
Okay.
I really hate the ballot language. We tried to fix it. It was this whole thing, but the ballot will say that there is, I forget, I already voted, but it said something to the effect that there would be a future cost to people. And yeah, if you pass future bonds, but if someone's not paying attention, they might just be like, oh, cost, nope. And so it was a huge bummer. Yeah.
Right. You would not be voting to change any tax, anything with this, just opportunity to tax. Yes.
Correct.
Yes. Right.
because the state bond are paid by the general fund. That's not an individual tax, but local bonds are directly effective for homeowners for probably 35 years. Which is why we all still have, 10 or 15 different bonds ongoing there.
I was down in Berkeley yesterday and they have a competing EE and FF measures. They're both citizens initiatives to fix the roads and sidewalks. It's really interesting. There's two, and one is supported by the Sierra Club and the other by, it's all do-gooders on all these, please do this. I know that their street levels like 50, a grade from the regional authority, a 57, which is a not quite failing. And Petaluma is like at a 47, which is like pretty much failing. And that committee, like two of them are competing. And they're talking about $200 to $300 per year on your property tax directly. So, and they're competing with each other saying, this, and they're 12 to 14 year payments and stuff like that. So it would open the door to clever propositions, which you need to be real careful of in the future. That's true.
And
As I recall, that money we're talking about the former
Measure M, yeah.
$19 per 100,000. Is that right? You remember?
I somewhere around there because it was 126 million.
Or $30 per 100,000 each. So if both of those half, and it's $60 for $20, we could have gotten this whole thing. So it's important to see
Per 100,000.
because it does affect then. It affects homeowners. It affects first-time homeowners, and it also affects
Rents.
Rents because often landlords have to pass that on. They're not just raising it in and pocketing all this excess income.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to this. And so.
Yeah, this is kind of more what I guess I kind of jumped ahead a little bit and didn't fast forward the slides. But again, there's a lot of opportunities for, I know you guys are talking a lot about is it the blueprint for carbon neutrality?
Yeah.
So guess what this could help support? This would go towards some of those projects, some of those things that Petaluma is trying to achieve. This would help facilitate that and get you well on your way to getting that carbon zero community that you guys all want to create for yourselves. And it's something that the entire county, one of the primary pillars of the county of Sonoma is climate. Every city, it's all about the climate. This will get us there.
Okay. So it's not like we haven't seen this coming and aren't doing things already to help the affordable housing be created and to address the housing crisis. And one of the things we've done is we waived all impact fees on affordable housing. You know, you hear a lot of excuses. Oh, we can't build it because of this, you know, government regulation, government fee, and there's so many things. And we said, well, why don't we just take one of them off the table here? And we did it in a way where in their financial statement, it shows as a cost. It shows as a cost they're not paying. So it looks like a contribution to the project. So if there's $1 million in fees on a project, they still get to say, hey, the city put in $1 million in fees on the city. So it's a very positive way of doing that. But the rest of the funding that needs to come for a project is so very challenged that not enough of them are getting through.
And real quick on that note, there's three things usually affordable housing developers will ask for. It's a waiver of impact fees, it is a land donation, or is money from the jurisdiction, sometimes a combination of all three of those. So that was a huge first step, and we didn't even have to ask them. That's the crazy thing. They just did it, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's been really hard with other
it-
jurisdictions.
it is
Petaluma
really
was like,
fun to-
we could do this.
It is fun to get recognized as the city who first did this, because the rest are coming around. The rest are all seeing that's the, I think you beat up on the county and the county jumped in, didn't they? Yeah, okay, well, they're all coming around. And so we also have, you know, this last year, the mobile homes parks situation has really come to a head, and there's just a tremendous conflict going on there. And the thing about conflict is there's people involved. And so people are being harmed, the stress involved in what's going on there, and their feeling of inability to affect their own lives anymore. It's a real awful thing. And the city has really worked hard on it and will continue to. You'll see this on council agenda here. But like I said, that's affordable housing, and it's stopping to be affordable if landlords jack rent and the rest of the tricks that they're pulling out to change it. And then lastly, I mentioned investing in projects. That's the Corona Road Smart Station. And then the last one is the coming of age crisis. I mean, city is trying to get on board with figuring out what we do when we're older here in our town. What BAFA would have done for us specifically is it would have allowed production. And so we're talking about the first one again. Better slide editing next time. The Meridian at Corona Smart Station was 130 units, and that has received some really cool grants because it's at the nexus of different kinds of transportation. And when you do that, the state says, hey, that gives you the points to win our competition for state financing. But it didn't give us enough points. And so it's still kind of stuck in got most of it. It has earmarks on several sources of funding, but not enough. So it's still trying to get over the finish line. And then the smart station downtown has been a dust bowl for almost as long as I've lived here. And it should be something. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be or should be, but likely it'll be a lot of housing because it's in the center of town, it's near services and things like that. And BAFA would have been able to help us incentivize that to a better place, move that along. So, and we also have another application in on East Washington across from the library. And some of the things that happen is the state provides rules that says, hey, nonprofit housing, they're going to build housing. They get a lot of carte blanche from city. They don't have to go through as much process as regular development. They have to honor objective design standards we have, but other things maybe less so. So they can come in and put in an application, which they did, which they were sensitive to our concerns for the property. But if they can't get money, they don't house people. They're just architectural. The only person making money is the architect. So, and then lastly, the state has a program called Home Key, which we have what's called Montero at off of North McDowell and Old Redwood Highway. There's a motel tucked back in there. And we turned the motel into housing, permanent supportive housing. This program came with the money to change the motel into apartments and to have services, mental health services, housing services for the folks who got got the lucky ticket to get into there. The state's coming out with another program similar. And the beauty is it's not just housing. Those are people that need supportive services. It comes with money for that. Elsewise, people go in and out of housing. You get people off the street and into housing when they've done their time in tiny house, when they've done their time in shelter, that they get somewhere where they can stay and not return to the street.
Also, we left one thing out. Petaluma is also, I mean, a lot of jurisdictions are in Sonoma County now, but Petaluma is a pro-housing designated jurisdiction. And there's actually not a huge amount in the state, but what that does do for Petaluma now is they get moved to the front of the line when it comes to processing applications. So when they submit an application for a grant, they're getting moved to the top, which is actually a really good thing, because that does help in some respects. And also, it does give them access to grant funding that non-pro housing designated communities they don't get access to it. So there's specialized troughs of funding we can draw upon now, which is really cool.
Right, that is, okay, so great question. Yes, Petaluma just got a grant for $8 million for homelessness, addressing homelessness more broadly. And it's to be spent over 3 years, I think it is. And it covers a whole bunch of different things we could and should do. So some of it is addressing camps and addressing peoples, and others of it is addressing shelter. And so it's a real huge shot in the arm, and we're one of 20 in the state that got it. And part of that is because we have such a good strategy on solving homelessness. We're taking step by step logical things and getting through there. The state recognizes that if they help us succeed, we might be the model for everyone to succeed. And so far, really nobody has figured out the success yet. So in most of the housing decisions by state and regional governments, they reference 3 Ps. So we just looked at production, and then there's preservation. And thanks to Drake here for sharing a few photos of what they do in mobile home parks, from scary old school water heaters to modern water heater, pressure relief on it. Like to see that. Maybe a little scary having the little guy with the nail gun, but
hey, they're fun.
I didn't know that. But so many of these structures are built to last 20 years, and they're well past that. And so, floors are failing, ceilings are failing. And the city puts money into rebuilding, and then they go and get about 10 times that. So 10 times, or is it 20 times? So rebuilding Petaluma is a real gem for our community, and we have so many of them. That's one of the ways we would spend the money if that money came to Petaluma. Is that a heat pump water heater, or was that a conventional?
Mhm.
And get the unit or the repairs necessary, or these are real mobile homes. They're built 1972. They have aluminum wiring, and they have about 50 amp service panel. So the pump, electric water heater requires rewiring the entire house.
Yeah. No.
So that's one limitation from our working on. Some clean power is in
Mhm. Mhm.
I can tell you, I just put a heat pump hot water heater in my home last year, and it looked exactly like that. That's what we got to do with the.
Okay, sorry about being offline there for a second. Did you have a question? Okay. So then the third P is protection. And that includes the work that COTS does for so many. And I was over visiting, and they were saying that the largest emerging demographic of homeless folks is seniors. And I said, what do you need the most? They said, we need family shelter. We don't have any family. If we have a shelter, we can put a senior in there. We need to figure out the right service, but we don't have family shelter to the extent we need. And so we're looking on that. And then I mentioned the foreclosure on old notes. And down payment assistance, first time buyer programs. There's a lot of inventive and creative stuff we can do tailored to our community. And
Yeah.
so-
And on the down payment assistance front, Burbank put up a program a year ago, and Santa Rosa did the same. And from what I heard, it got depleted very quickly. There was a lot of interest. Hell, I even thought about it, but then I was like, oh, I feel guilty. I'm sure people need him more than I do. And but we do need a lot more funding for that, just to get, again, some younger folks into their first home.
Yeah, that's sort of a problem with some of the programs. People say, well, the thing you want to do, is it impactful? Does it change the world? And we look and sometimes you go, well, it was impactful for that person and that person, but it may not have been, I mean, it's definitely impactful for the person who gets it. Question? In that period, Petaluma and other cities, they did like a lot of sweat equity housing. They did things where they got people into housing, and they had they had seconds that were placed on them, and then they had there were a whole collection of reasons why now we would never do affordable housing that way, but those were the starter set, and we're learning from those mistakes. And we don't want that house to come out of the affordable pool. We want to spend a little bit of money to keep it in the affordable pool. And a lot that would be the single family dwelling side of things, right? Like what we talked about, in any subdivision that comes in now, 1 in 6 of the subdivision houses are affordable housing. They're deed restricted forever. And so, and their appreciation is capped. So you get to have an appreciation as a homeowner, right? But your rent is reduced when you come in, but the cap on it is, it's tied to wage inflation in the area. So you don't get speculative market kind of, you don't get an outlandish appreciation like many of us have had on our homes in the community.
And in case Deb Getchus or Caitlin Garfield are listening, the Housing Land Trust would have also, going a step
Oh,
back,
my
would have
goodness.
benefited from Prop 5 as well. I mean, it would have given them opportunity to get a hold of more properties, expand that portfolio, help keep the homes cheap in perpetuity. And so, again, like a huge opportunity in front of us. And we all love the Housing Land Trust. It's a great program. What they're doing is awesome. And hopefully we can build on that in all jurisdictions. And so that's another great reason to vote yes.
There are so many people we should give shout outs to who are doing things independent of the city or in collaboration with the city. And what you're talking about with Sonoma Housing Land Trust started out as Petaluma Land Trust. Somebody had to do, when we put in this program, somebody had to be the agency that in perpetuity would do the business of running a housing. And so they did. And then Roner Park thought that was a good idea, and they started doing the same thing. And all these cities now, they're in Napa and
Now
Mendo
they're
and
Housing Land Trust of the Bay Area.
Yeah.
They're big
So-
dogs now.
some of the stuff we do, we don't give it enough credit for that. It's really cool and it's contagious. And then you notice it coming up in other communities. So we have got to the end of our slide presentation. And funny thing, we were reviewing the slides, we were checking all the data, and make sure there was tons of numbers to look at. And then I said, Cal, what's our call to action? Why isn't there a slide here at the end that says, and what your takeaway is this? And so we thought, well, we kind of know exactly what we would each say. And so my side of things is our community needs housing. There are people that don't have housing, and we can do a thing. We can do a bunch of different things to help, and we have to do the right things, but we have to do something rather than nothing. The existing system, the status quo is failure. We have to do something. It may not be perfect, but we have to do something.
Mhm.
And I know what you're going to say. What's your big takeaway for the crowd tonight?
Yeah, again, vote yes. For the love of God, vote yes. We need the money, and housing infrastructure, all of it. We need the funding. I mean, what we're doing right now, what we have right now is not enough. And I think we're looking at structural deficits in a lot of jurisdictions for several years to come, unless the economy really turns around. I mean, that's just fact of the matter. I mean, it's how things are. But this can really help, keep that engine running forward and hopefully prevent us from further having to cut positions, cut funding for key programs. Again, I'm sorry, I know I'm the Debbie Downer, but I'm just trying to paint the picture for you and let you know this is why we really, really, really need this.
So let's start with some questions, and if you ask, I'll repeat.
only, rebates and things, and, that's the reason that GM said they keep doing electric vehicles, because in a small town in Northern California outlawed the building of new gas.
Okay, well, that's a really great comment. And so I'll try and repeat that comment to you. There's a lot of value in being an early adopter. I mean, for so many different reasons. We mentioned finance, but what you're saying is even on the climate side and even on the electrical vehicle side. And what year did you get your first vehicle? All right, congrats. Right, and your point was that at that point it was nearly free to you. There's so much incentive in it. In 2013, I got mine and it paid me. Yeah. So, and in the middle here.
So, have we tried to do infill, and yet we have this large amount of housing we're gonna build? My understanding is that it's tougher to do infill because there's a lot more sort of barriers. There's less space, there's more kind of process barriers. So how do you overcome that? I understand your money, right? But what are other ways that you overcome that so that you can actually build enough housing in a more constrained environment?
Well, got some ideas.
Okay. So the question here is, the perception that infill development is more challenging than sprawl. Okay. So, I would challenge that assumption on a base level. And I would say that the difference is infill has neighbors and neighbors have opinions, and sprawl, sometimes you don't have any neighbors and you get away with a lot of stuff. But if the city doesn't allow for sprawl, most of the lands that you could sprawl to are gone. There isn't a which one's easier. Only one is available to you. Now, some of them are of different densities. Infill means on the edge of town, one house didn't get built but in a row of houses. So that's infill too, right? Just one house. But as you get closer to the core of downtown, you see more and more density. And I think as you move to as we do more transit, you see more density being placed along transit. And I think the state is really pushing on this, and they've gone from what's called transit-oriented development to transit-oriented, what's the new one? Transit-oriented
TOC, the TOC
communities.
policy.
I mean, this has a little groundswell under it, coming from housing crisis, coming from climate crisis, coming from we just can't do the thing we used to do no more. One of the principal tenets of Know Before You Grow is sprawl is municipally financed unsustainable. It just doesn't garner the revenue to ever replace the pipe in the street and send a cop that far from the hub of town. When we're not going to jack taxes to get to that kind of thing, but we won't encourage that anymore.
And something every single developer will tell you is every site is different. It doesn't matter if they're all downtown. There's always going to be unique circumstances. I mean, take, for example, some of the downtown properties could, there could be water 10 feet down. Theoretically. I mean, so you never know, what you're getting into until you actually get, put something in the ground to see what's down there. And then you can kind of make an informed decision from there. But to Kevin's point also, I mean, infrastructure usually downtown is going to be a lot more robust, obviously, because you're fielding a lot more. If you have to take it out to a more rural area, suburban area, chances are there might need to be infrastructure work, which obviously adds cost. And it is difficult, sometimes, with some of these infill projects, obviously in the downtown areas, there is a lot of value in maintaining historical resources. Petaluma is pretty awesome. And it is always a challenge kind of, I think walking that line and having those conversations with people so we can come to an agreement on what is the vision and how can we achieve everything we need to achieve without, because at the end of the day, we have to build up. Building out is no longer feasible. It is not an option. It's off the table. Like we have to keep our urban growth boundaries. I'm a huge urban growth boundary fan. I'm very grateful for Greenbelt Alliance for all their work on it. It's a big deal. Vote yes on that too, by the way. I'm sure you all will, but I would be remiss if I didn't put a plug for that.
Dan, does everybody online know that they can put a question in the chat? Dan will
I see
help
Miss
us
Peter
out.
Thompson's there.
Here's a lightning rod for Kevin to grab onto.
Ooh,
How many affordable units are VRBOs? Time to sunset that. No new ones, and when existing ones change ownership, VRBO is transferable.
interesting.
That's one I'm going to have to do my homework on. I'm not familiar with affordable housing being in VRBO. And so I would think that there's prohibition against that, and that is something that needs some attention.
Oh, that's definitely illegal.
But Cal pointed out earlier, there are plenty of studies showing that availability of housing, even above the rate that you think you're creating housing at, causes people to move up.
Mhm.
I heard that in 2022, AB 602. Okay. I heard that in 2022, AB 602 let cities restructure development fees,
Yeah.
impact fees to be less incentive for large units. Either of you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, look at you just priming one. So that's one of the core elements of our housing action plan that we have listed on our website. And so AB 602 allows you to right size fees. So instead of assessing fees by the like per door or by the number of rooms, it's by the square footage overall. Because I mean, if you have a 500 square foot unit, it shouldn't be paying the same impact fees as a 2,000 square foot unit. That's just crazy. And so AB 602 is working to at a statewide level, make sure that we're right sizing those fees and it's actually, reflective of the true impact of the unit. And so it's a landmark bill. And that's one of the principal things that we're moving forward.
And I also see that our perception of what's good and what's acceptable has changed over 50 and 75 years. When the center of Petaluma was built, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 3-bedroom, 1-bath was 1,000 square feet. Right now, I see the apartment average size is a 2-bedroom apartment is over 1,100 square feet. And you think, how did we go from that to this? And then you look at the size of the cars we drive. And you look at a number of other things that we say, and we've just been a very successful country. We've been so successful and so materialistic, and consumption of resource is going high. But that's for those of us who are on the good side of the bubble. For those on the other side of the bubble, maybe we're things we do to reduce our consumptive levels or our house size could be acceptable. But if the decision makers are all our side of the bubble and can't imagine living in that kind of size unit, right? It's very hard to right size our community. I think we have to live out what we are, but we need to be sensitive to what other people's abilities, what the country provides at this time. It's a changing world. We need to change.
All right, I should put longer cords on everything.
It's all Dan's fault.
So it's sort of along the same thing you just talked about. So I know there are many older adults in this community who would love to downsize, but there's no place for them to go. And I know
Yes.
the ultimate solution is to have more housing so people could move around.
Mhm.
But in the meantime, I mean, are there things that could happen that would there be affordable developments that are aimed at that? I don't know. What is there anything that we can do now to start addressing that issue?
Yeah, I mean, we do need a lot of again, it actually goes to condos, condos aren't just for first time home buyers. It's for older folks that want to downsize. And one of the things they actually did change, with Prop 13, as many of you probably know, is you can now carry over your tax rate from the home you're in to the home that you move into. And so you don't have to worry about, potentially getting dinged, which is great. I mean, you shouldn't get dinged if you're trying to downsize. But again, to your point, the challenge is we just don't have a lot of those homes because we just have single family detached homes that are like 2,000 square feet. And I mean, my mother lives, higher. Actually, I think ours in the desert, my mom's home is probably 2,700 or something. She is 66, lives by herself. She doesn't want to live there anymore, but she has so much stuff. It's also just anxiety inducing to even think about moving.
And we are trying to open doors, but it's real hard to find the right door. But one of the potential doors is the ADUs. I mean, one of the reasons that I know certain friends downtown don't want to move out of downtown is because you have access to all the cool cut stuff, right? And you can walk to things, but they don't want that 2,000, 2,500 square foot house. But if they can have a roommate, which there's groups that now
Share
do
Sonoma.
Share Sonoma does that and is pretty successful at it. And we're talking about aging here. Or an ADU has been facilitated by state law to try and accelerate production of ADUs. And they can be, at up to 1,200 square feet. I don't know where you'd fit that on some of the downtown lots, but sometimes 600, 700 square feet actually feels okay. Single person.
Actually, since you brought that up real quick, there was a law that just passed, AB 1023, that actually now allows the condoization of ADUs and primary residence. So what you can do is you can put an ADU in the backyard and then you can do essentially a lot split. And you can have an ADU as a for sale unit. So you'll live with someone. It's very English, European style. You share a lot of the communal resources, and then you have an HOA and you all chip in for like the garage, or I'm sorry, the garage apron, I guess, sidewalks, things like that you'll pay into, but you'll have your separate meters, you'll own the land beneath you. And it's another great opportunity for first time home buyers and young families, or it's a great opportunity for maybe the parent to go live in the ADU, and then the young family to start building equity in the larger home and have children. And to your point, it's about creating a diversity of housing types that meets all needs, and we don't have that. I like that.
The reason that I wanted to come tonight is because I wanted to mention this type of congregate living. As a senior, would love to downsize and I can't find a place to live. But there's a developer in San Francisco that's been doing this for, I don't know, I first heard about this 5 or more years ago, who he built housing for 20 somethings before the pandemic. And it was like, think dorm housing, bedrooms and bathrooms is what you own or you rent or whatever. And the rest of it's, like a common living area. And that the thinking was that it would be temporary. They'd live there for a year or two, then they'd move on, and people didn't want to leave because they loved living there. And I thought, boy, that would be great. I don't need assisted living or care, but I don't need a big, huge house either. And,
They call that single room occupancy, or SROs for short. And those are growing in popularity again. We actually got rid of a lot of those in Santa Rosa, and countywide. We got rid of them. And now they're bringing them back because they're like, oh, wait, this is actually a really cool idea. What were we thinking? And so now there's actually emphasis on that, but we haven't built any new ones yet.
There we go. And it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge the expert in the room on this thing, which would be co-housing. When you can build co-housing, and I'm not going to put him on the spot unless he wants to be on the spot. But basically, the ideas of trying to do this, it's the city rules that with the old school mindset and the infrastructure that we asked that person to put in their project was the thing that tipped it over the edge and made it not a viable project.
Oh, I remember this.
Though it was super cool.
I remember this.
Yeah.
No.
Next question.
I can talk loud. So.
Well,
Kevin-
we'd like to be done.
Oh, got it.
So for here in Petaluma, it sounds like we've, as a city, we've done a pretty good job at promoting affordable housing. We've been successful with some projects. From a non-affordable housing, how would you grade our performance from a planning perspective? Like if I'm a potential developer thinking about putting some condos, say, across from Casa Grande, and or some townhomes, am I gonna have a good experience in Petaluma, or how would you rate that, and sort of what would you suggest we do better?
Okay, great question about housing policy and great question about Kevin's personal opinions. So, city has a fairly well-defined code, what's allowable, what's not allowable, and if you need an amendment for something, how to appeal for that. And there's just tremendous process in place. And so, I think that the city process is very rigorous, but it's a path to doing something. If you can last through the rigorous process as a developer, then you get to the finish line for market rate housing. And I think we can see from the amount of housing we've created in the last 10 years that not many people can get to the finish line. So, you know, we are seeing a development on Casa Grande, but almost all the housing we see that has been built is built along major corridor. So you drive by it every day, you see the dang thing every day, but you don't see sprawl. We've really reduced what went out. But what we did build, what was built in town, absolutely you see all the time. So it's kind of a trade-off. You like the urban separator. Well, these infills, like the one you mentioned, would be called infill development. So there's that. The second, I can't go without offering personal opinion as well. And my personal opinion is market rate development needs no assistance, no help along the way, no anything. Affordable housing needs everybody's help to get to the finish line. And so I'm happy to let a developer try and get through all the process that's in front of them. Because I'm spending my time looking at the capital A affordable stuff.
I would say though, on the market rate side of it, you know, what we're trying to really encourage, incentivize is smaller condos. So condos that are 1,200 square feet or less. I mean, I have a friend that just got one for 800 square feet, which is more than she needs as a single woman. And so, you know, again, trying to have that kind of diversity, and there's ways you can incentivize. Unfortunately, the troughs of funding though, as I kind of alluded to earlier, you're not going to get funding, tax credit funding, you know, the principal mechanism for funding affordable housing. You will not get tax credits for moderate units. It doesn't happen. You have to have it indexed to a very low or low. And then it has to be at least 50 units or you're not competitive at all, and you will get no funding from the federal government.
Which is why for our moderates, we do that as our inclusionary policy, the 15%, 1 in 6 houses thing, because you don't get outside funding. Downside of that is the other 5 houses bought down your house. So
the upside of it is housing land trust can acquire some of those units, some of those moderate units, and manage them locally. So we know who's managing them, and we know local people are in those units. So there is a bit of an upside to that inclusionary.
And that's why we need both programs. Some people say, oh, well, put all your money into the apartment type, nonprofit type. And we say, no, we need housing at every demographic here. We don't need it. But I'm just saying that market rate doesn't need help getting over the finish line. We look at arena numbers, we succeed in hitting the number the state says we should do at market rate. We do not hit the number state says we should do at low, very low and moderate.
Yeah, a lot of people missed the moderate one this past time.
I guess I would ask for some gray area in that assessment, because my assessment is that, like a 2,000 square foot single family house doesn't need any subsidy. But for somebody who's trying to build something that is affordable by design and not asking for any subsidy, and then still subject to the city's processes and fees and requests for
Bingo.
offsite improvements and other things that make that unit not affordable. I there ought to be some grace for that scenario.
Yeah, I think what we haven't yet talked about is affordable by design as a term. When we talk condo, it's sort of affordable by design. There's other things that are affordable by design. And yes, if somebody comes in with an innovative idea, it fits my basket for of what I was saying about affordable. We need to have them. And I'm not sure, I think the co-op housing still had to have an inclusionary element to it. And so
Yeah.
the rules were not bent much for an innovative, and, you know, maybe in hindsight, innovative should get a more of a thumb on the scale for getting it forward because
And-
it fits affordable.
And that's something honestly that I would consider bringing forward to your local state elected. You know, that's a conversation to perhaps, you know, have with Senator McGuire, like, hey, you know, here's where we might have missed the mark and where we want to really focus on creating more cooperative housing, like Frog Song and Katati, for example. Great development. A lot of people live there, Ben Ford, Eris Weaver, even Jeff Cyphers, all these big
Council member
people.
Ford,
Yeah.
head of Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition, Eris
And
Weaver.
Sonoma Clean Power. They all live there and I would love to live there. It actually seems like a pretty cool community. But you know, no one's leaving.
Online?
They did it together and I don't remember when off the top of my head. But if you ever want to hear about it, I highly recommend reaching out to Eris Weaver. She's more than happy to tell you all about it because she was there from the outset.
So not a question, but Sandra Lowe in the chat says, Prop 5 is very close. PPSA has it at 50-50, but does it need 2/3?
No.
Oh, it just needs 50? Okay, and there are text banking opportunities and social media tools on the website.
Sandra, put in the chat if I'm correct. I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Okay, Cal, Sandra Lowe is who again?
Oh, Sandra Lowe
Yeah.
is mayor still, yes? No, not
No,
mayor
not mayor.
anymore, council member of
Sonoma
City of
Town.
Sonoma.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sonoma Council member.
And lead on the Prop 5 campaign and we're very grateful
And-
for her hard work on
And
it.
I believe on the BAFA efforts too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
And she's been in the trenches.
we have allies in everywhere, so.
Talk about condos a lot. You guys have talked a lot about condominiums, but our experience was that no insurance company would insure them, no architect would design them, no construction company would construct them. There's some sort of fix that's necessary on condos as well.
You really want to dig deep into this. So you're not wrong. That is actually an issue that's, you know, we're trying to address at the state level. You know, a lot of times with like these duets and triplexes, it can be a little bit more expensive to build them, you know, just based on their size alone because of some of the things that you have to build, like thicker walls and whatnot. But that doesn't mean we can't find creative policy solutions to lower costs elsewhere to like impact fees, for example, that will help. But there's other things, you know, streamlining the process and a whole host of policies that we can continue, you know, moving forward on to help make it a little bit more financially feasible. But it is incredibly challenging. The insurance, insurance, yeah, don't get me started on that. It is a hot mess in the state of California.
Well, I'm going to ask two questions now. I may have missed something there as I was talking to Mayor McDonnell. There was a bill in the legislature last year that didn't go through. Did you mention that? To
Which bill? There was a lot of bills.
uh,
There's a lot many years.
on this particular topic, there was a bill to reduce construction liability on condos.
Oh, yes, yeah. So there was it was this year, the construction defect law.
Right.
So one of the things, and actually this is one of the core reasons they don't do it. Construction defect law is so strong now and so favors the owners that, say, for example, there's one small issue with, you know, a condo after it's built and it's a triplex attached. All three of them can sue the developer and they would lose millions and millions and millions. So there's no incentive then for them to take on that liability. It's not like they're trying to put up, you know, garbage condos. It's sometimes mistakes are made. And I mean, I'm not saying there's not bad actors. Obviously there's bad actors, but there's a lot of times where it's just mistakes are made and then the liability is huge, exposure is huge. And so they're trying to address that. The bill unfortunately failed, but we're gonna keep negotiating and trying to figure it out.
Well, and as a retired professional, I know there are firms out there, architects, engineers, et cetera, who are barred by their insurer from working on condos.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, you're putting yourself in a hole.
And to be clear real quick, it's not that we're trying to take those protections away from the homeowners. We're just trying to strike a finer balance so that they can be protected, but also there isn't significant liability. And mainly, if there's a defect in one unit that doesn't affect the other units, then the other units shouldn't be able to also sue. The person that is affected should be able to one that to sue. So it lessens the liability, lessens the exposure. And that's one of the things we were trying to secure.
Now, back to the question I originally meant to ask. Mayor Kevin, at Monday evening's council meeting, Brian Barnacle, late in the evening, said, we should not build to our arena numbers, we should build to our values. Thoughts? We should not build to our arena numbers, we should build to our values.
Okay, so I guess we heard from the cheap seats there that our moderator, Dan, that perhaps we already are building to our values, which I think ironically would mean not building and having a housing crisis. And so I would never be that sarcastic or.
I love the dark humor.
But yeah, I agree with the idea that our values should include housing people. And if our decisions are based on other things without, serious consideration of housing people, then we don't have the equation right. And I hear a lot of people say, well, this town is too big already. This town is got too much traffic problem already. And these are things. And I believe you'll hear that in every town. I think everybody feels that way. And I think that again comes back to the world is changing. The fact that we have the climate crisis and we're just coming to grips with the oh my God moment for that is. And our income inequality is growing and more people are left behind. I think we need a little soul searching for what our value is and in what way we can address change. We can't just change. One of the whole points of know before you grow was to know before we grow, so that we were participating in some sort of decision model and hopefully value-based decision model, factoring all the things that come in, not waiting till the last minute when something's already burning down, like we feel the system is now. The status quo is unacceptable. And also not seeing it getting built and wondering, when was that ever discussed? How come I didn't know that was going to happen? There's a balance. And I think I'm going to close with, I'm sure glad you're all here tonight hearing this and hopefully talking about it with other people, that the world is changing and it's better to be part of the conversation than to wonder what happened at a later time. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say thank you. And do you have something else just wanted to say? No.
Vote yes on Prop 5.
And measure Y and yeah, okay.
And why, and all that good stuff.
Thanks to both our speakers, much appreciated. Kevin, I know you put this together without a lot of lead time, but great presentation. Thank you. Thanks to all of you for being here to close out the 2024 Know Before You Grow session. Please come back in 2025, bring your friends, bigger, better, always more things to talk about, more things to do. Thanks. And there's still food and drink on the back table, cookies and water, but hey, it counts. Feel free to hang around, meet new people, discuss thoughts, catch me.